What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a little preview of the Gothic 1 remake that is upcoming at the beginning of June, in fact. And as it so happens, very recently, a PR company that I am in contact with sometimes who works on behalf of publishers and stuff reached out and asked if I would like to take a look at some pretty new Gothic gameplay that they are releasing to some select people. I obviously said yes to that, as I am looking forward to the remake itself, and it also happened to answer and explain at least a few questions that I had, though perhaps honestly brings up even more. But in that context, it's important to note that I did not play this. This was a hands-off thing. They just showed off some gameplay footage and things of some of the stuff they have upcoming that then, of course, elaborated upon some of the new features and things they are working on as a whole. Now, I have talked about the remake a few times already. I've covered the Nyrus prologue demo that's been available for a little while, which isn't the exact character you'll play in the full game, but showed off a lot of the basic mechanics and stuff of how things will work. I've also, very recently, just a couple months ago actually, talked about the game and a lot of the details that had been announced, like the armor customization options and things like that, which I'm telling you to simply explain that I do have more information about this game, and in fact, to take it even farther, I reviewed the original a few years ago, which is one of the reasons I'm so keen to jump into this remake and see what they did with it. But before we go too deep on all that, let's talk about some of the new stuff they added here, or at least the new gameplay and, the stuff I'm about to show you and everything, and talk about what I noticed there. So, the new gameplay that I saw follows the quest to join the mercenaries of the new camp. That is one of the factions that will be available to join and interact with in the full game, of which there are 3. The old camp, the new camp, and the swamp camp. Now, the catch here is this gameplay actually shows off some of the new content they are adding. If you just happen to have missed it, the Gothic Remake is going to include the original game and everything and try to capture what made that game so great, which is in no small part due to things like its atmosphere and the way the mechanics worked, clunky as they were. But they're also trying to expand on some things as well, and that was the kind of goal here. So while we're looking to join the mercenaries of the new camp, we're going to do so, at least in part, by following up on a new quest for a water mage named Mixer. Now, Mixer was in the original game. He just didn't really, have much going on. He was just a character there. Here, they are giving him a full-blown quest where you can run to a beach and help him track down a magical tome of druid nature. It's implied there will be a follow-up quest to that, though obviously I don't know that for sure. But in so doing, again, they showed off some interesting stuff. Right off the bat, I am very, very curious how much of this new content will actually be present. So is it just a couple of quests? Is it, a significant amount of content? And while I'm happy to experience this in just the normal way with the new graphics and controls and everything, and some of the minor tweak systems, I am very curious how much content and stuff was actually added to the game. Especially since, if you've played the original Gothic, you're probably aware that a lot of the faction content in particular is more about joining the faction than it is anything else. Once you've joined the faction, that was, for the most part, kind of it. It just kind of goes full main story after that, outside of just some general side quests. But with the addition of this new content, I find myself very curious if they are going to add, more post-joining the faction content and change up some quests there and give you new things to do. And I would honestly hope so, because some of the stuff they have talked about previously was bringing the orcs into a full faction of their own and not just feeling, kind of like a one-dimensional enemy, which to be fair kind of lines up more with how they were depicted in the second game, which I've also played and reviewed. Long story short, very curious to see all the new content they have planned there. But obviously that's not the only thing. I did notice that they showed off fire lizards as a prominent enemy in this little gameplay snippet, and that is noteworthy because they did not kill your character immediately, which does at least hint to some amount of perhaps balancing changes, I guess you could say. For those who don't know, fire lizards in the first game especially were awful if they hit you. They didn't necessarily have a lot of health, but you tend to fight them in groups, and they all had this fire breath thing that would kill you very, very fast. Especially if you were low level, but that's pretty much everything in Gothic. But these things remained a nuisance even at higher levels. And here you see our character catch one of those fire blasts and be fine, so I am kind of curious if that does hint to some balancing changes, which I suppose given the nature of the remake wouldn't be unheard of or anything. I just thought it might be noteworthy. In fighting those fire lizards, we see some of the basics of the melee combat. Nothing too crazy here. I just wanted to point out that just like the very end of the prologue, we see some of the like combos beginning. So the original Gothic had a system where you started off very bad at combat, and this showed in like how you swung your weapon and everything. And as you leveled up and spent points in training, the animations and everything would change, and you could change them together to like literally see your character become more proficient in the way they swung their weapon and chained together combos. We only saw that very, very briefly at the end of the Nyrus prologue, and here we get a slightly bigger glimpse of that exact same thing, so it does seem they are planning on carrying that forward, which I would say is probably kind of a given. It's a pretty important part of a game like this. But we also saw two other things in this gameplay snippet that really caught my eye, and that is that this quest with Mixer that is new takes you underwater. Now, the original Gothic did have a couple of underwater moments where you needed to like swim and dive down, but they were used pretty sparingly, like it didn't come up a lot. And this is an entire new quest with a component that sends you directly into the water to go fetch some stuff, and that of course does make me wonder in and of itself just how much of that content was added. Is, underwater exploration within the mining colony you are trapped in still a relatively minor thing and this is just a one-off, or did they make more of that system than even I realized? Either way, however, while under that water, we actually get to take a look at the new lockpicking system. So the original game's lockpicking was in and of itself pretty clunky, and it looks like here they are using a system of tumblers that you have to perfectly align. So it looks like moving one will move multiple, and you have to mess around with them in order to get them to line up. Pretty standard puzzle. I don't know if there's like an actual name for it, but you see it a lot. And lining them up in this little visual puzzle will, of course, unlock the thing you are trying to unlock. And I obviously think that's immediately a better system than the original games, which had very, very clunky lockpicking that did not feel great to use. So there's that. And then at the very end of this gameplay snippet, we also see the return of some teleportation. This is a form of fast travel you get access to in the games, effectively letting you teleport to important places by utilizing items you can come across. And we see that take place at the end of the gameplay snippet. So I thought that was really cool as well. Now, truth be told, that is most of the new stuff I saw here. There are some things that we saw on display here that we had known about previously, like the armor customization. You can see the armor on our nameless hero here has some like different attachments and things, and that is because they are implementing a customization system where you can basically upgrade your armor, which changes it visually as well, and we got a preview of that a couple of months ago when I covered the game then. Pretty cool to see that in motion, and I do think it adds a little bit of visual variety to what our samey models back in the day in which Gothic 1 was made. Speaking of Gothic 1 and when it was made, however, a couple other things I want to mention here. So I talked about them doing things to make the orcs feel a little less one-dimensional, and that actually extends to other parts of the game as well. So I did not see this in the gameplay snippet. This is just something we have heard from what the studio has said previously, but what they're also going to do is expand some of the day-night cycle. An incredibly remarkable thing about Gothic 1 is that it was effectively an open world RPG that saw you, interacting with people of camps that had like full-blown schedules and stuff, like a good solid little while before something like Morrowind released. And while the remake is obviously going to retain that, they are apparently taking that a little bit farther, diversifying some of those schedules, and then of course adding all that new quest and content stuff I've already talked about to make all of the characters feel a little more lively, and as they've put it, try to expand on the moral ambiguity of the overall story setup of the game, which is certainly an interesting way to put it. But that actually kind of leads me into another thing that I wanted to mention. I fully admit all the time that I came to the Gothic series a bit late. I mentioned that I reviewed the originals a few years back, and that was actually my first interactions with them. People recommended them a lot. I really enjoyed what Piranha Bytes had done, which is sadly a closed studio these days. But even in playing it so many years later, the thing that really stood out to me about the original Gothic series was the atmosphere of those games that shone through even the graphics and things of the time. Walking through a forest in that game was surprisingly atmospheric, given the literal implications of how it looked. Combine that stuff then with, everything else the game's got going on, the setting, how it throws you into this very unforgiving place and you have to sort of dig your way up to power. I find myself genuinely very, very curious if the remake is going to be able to capture that feeling. It seems like they're on the right track. Everything I've seen so far looks pretty promising, but that's not really a question I can have answered until I'm in here playing the game in full for myself, because that atmosphere to me is what makes Gothic Gothic. And while there is no doubt in my mind that the remake here will simply look better than the original in terms of its graphical fidelity, I am just immensely curious if they can capture the spirit of that old game. And like I said, they seem to be on the right track. They're saying the right things. I've seen the right stuff. The day-night cycle and things that they've shown off, etc., all look really cool, but I really just want to play it for myself and see if it feels the way the original did, because my hope is that it does. Because again, even coming to this series as late as I did, you play through that original game and even the second one as well, and you immediately know that we're onto something special here. And it is my sincere hope that this remake captures all of that and really makes it just a great entry point for new people into the series as a whole, especially in the wake of Piranha Bytes shutting down. I'd really love to see that legacy carried forward, let's say. But as for today in this video, I do think that is pretty much going to do it. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, by all means, let me know how you feel about it down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. Let me know how you feel about this one down in the comment section below, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.